If you're looking to start your therapeutic microdosing journey, but don't know where to start, especially when looking for the highest quality ingredients, including nootropics, and what you'd expect from a true microdose capsule, check out our friends at Brainsupreme. They offer the absolute highest quality ingredients so you can start your microdosing journey knowing that you're getting top-notch ingredients. To find out more, visit their website using that link right in the description, and you can get 15% off your entire order.
I think it's just going to get weirder and weirder and weirder, and finally it's going to be so weird that people are going to have to talk about how weird it is. Eventually people are going to say, what the hell is going on? It's not enough to say it's nuts. You have to explain why it's so nuts. The invention of artificial life, the cloning of human beings, possible contact with extraterrestrials, the systems which are in place to keep the world sane are utterly inadequate to the forces that have been unleashed.
Welcome back to Forbidden Knowledge News. I'm your host, Chris Matthew. Today my guest is Alana Bliss. Check out my films Doors of Perception on Amazon Prime, Occult Louisiana is on Tubi, Roku Channel, Apple, and more. Booking guests for January. If you have suggestions or you'd like to be a guest, email me forbiddenknowledgenews@gmail.com. Today I want to welcome back to the show Alana Bliss. She has committed herself to being an embodied agent of change through intentionally creating a regenerative culture and lifestyle. She is an eclectic theist, permaculturist, conscious birth educator, doula, writer, and entrepreneur. Alana, welcome back. How you doing?
Doing well, thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Glad to have you back. When you were previously on, we discussed an introduction to sacred childbirth. Today we're going to continue the discussion, taking a deeper dive into the topic. With the rapid technological advancements, it seems the further many get from truly beneficial, natural ways of giving birth, I would think that the way we enter this realm has huge effects on our development and even spiritual connection. There's a lot we can get into with this based on your talking points. Before we do, remind the audience a little bit about yourself and let them know how they can find out more.
Okay, hi, thank you. I'm Alana Bliss. I have 5 children, 4 of which were born at home. I've been a doula and studied some midwifery. I decided to go on the permaculture path because it was a little more stabilizing, or it gave more stability to our lives for our children. So that's why I did that. And my youngest is 3, my oldest is 21. And I've had incredibly empowering birth experiences. I did have one emergency C-section, which was also very empowering because I have a lens where I perceive birth as a rite of passage and a fortification process where I gather the strength to become a powerful and present parent. So that's something that, because of this lens, I've been able to take hardships and transform them into these very strengthening experiences. So that's been pretty powerful. I had one child in Oregon, one in Minnesota, one in Costa Rica, and then another 2 in Minnesota. So I've been all over the place with that. And I've spoken throughout the world, not like all over, but in Portugal and Costa Rica, Minnesota, about birth, and Florida as a rite of passage. And really found that people are passionate about it. When I tell people I love to give birth, they kind of look at me like I'm crazy, but it's true, I do. And so I also have a spoken word piece that I wrote about it. And I'm just really passionate about re-empowering mother, father, and child, and really taking it back as a human experience and also a mammalian experience. So I think that that's really what I'm feeling drawn to in this season of my life.
Excellent. How long have you been exploring these methods of childbirth? Has it been since your first child or before?
Yes. Yeah. So I was I was terrified of childbirth because my mother would always use it as like a guilt trip, like, you better be nice. You were, 46 hours of hell or whatever she would say. And so I was scared about the pain and all this. And so I had my first pregnancy, I aborted because I was so scared. I didn't want to do it. And then I ended up becoming the Beltane Queen in Ashland, Oregon, and representing the fertility goddess. So that, kind of solidified it when I got pregnant, that like a month later, not even a month later. And so I felt like cornered into it, I guess. So I was like, okay, I have to experience birth. And I met a woman on a train who was like on spiritual fire around birth, and she had just witnessed her first birth. She'd been studying midwifery, and so I started to like dive in. I read Ina May's book, Spiritual Midwifery, and then I started realizing that it was actually an empowering thing. And if I was at home, I would be able to kind of sink into the relaxation of it instead of feel like a medical emergency. So I studied it. I wrote a spoken word piece about it. I performed it all over in Hawaii, in the States, in the mainland and wherever I went. And I kind of solidified that. And then I treated my pregnancy as if it were like a class. I dove in. I learned everything I could. Interviewed a ton of midwives, and then I went to a doctor, and the doctor tried to scare me out of home birth. She was telling me I would never be able to do it. I have a bicornate uterus, which is like kind of like heart shaped. So I have like two corns or whatever they call it. And so two horns. And so because of that, I would never go full term. I was too high risk. I have to be in a hospital. And then I left that doctor's appointment. It was a woman doctor too. I left crying. And I called one of the midwives that I felt the most resonant with, and I told her what had happened. And she said, "Sweetheart, you are fine. I'll be there every step of the way. You don't have to worry. It's all right." And so I went with her, and I had an extremely empowering birth experience where I met what I call the Great Mother, or this continuum consciousness of the Great Birther, an egregore that is the birth itself. And I felt incredibly supported, and we used crystal bowls, and I danced. I wouldn't say it was an actual dance. It was more like stomping my feet into contractions. And there was one moment during that birth where I was laying on a massage table, and my partner and my doula were like in the other room kind of preparing a snack or something for me. And I was like, oh, I'm alone and dejected. Oh. And so I started feeling a lot of pain. And I remember like in that moment, I felt like I was going to be ripped in half. And then luckily when the rush subsided, my mind was like, get up, dance. If you lay like this, you are going to end up on an operating table. Like you need to move your body, move your hips, just get relaxed and release. And I did that. And it was never as painful as it was in that moment again. And so that's kind of when I started to realize how I birth had a huge effect on my sensations. And then there was a crystal bowl in the room, and I remember like, play that. And I toned to the same frequency as the bowl, and my pain like rode the sound waves out. And I was like, it was just incredible after that. Everything we had essential oils and crystals and crystal bowls and did, all of the things. And I had an extremely empowering birth.
That's amazing. When it comes to our modern methods of birth, I think this is a good place to start. What are some of the biggest problems you see with our modern medical industry and the way that they do deliveries?
Yeah. So, the first one is women shouldn't be birthing on their backs.
Yeah.
Like that's the fundamental thing. Like I've never birthed on my back. I've birthed hands and knees. I've been at births where women have hung or squatted or like hung on their partners or hung on like a something off the ceiling. I use a sheet in that birth, so she can just like put her weight on it and relax. Water. It's like it's not natural because how we have our tailbone it kind of curves up a little bit at the base of our spine. Well, it's contrary to the baby being pushed out. So not only are we laying down and kind of condensing our hips, but we're also trying to push a baby over our tailbone. So that's a completely unnatural position. And it was invented, or it was actually, I shouldn't say invented, it was started to be used so that the doctors could have a better view of what was going on. So it has nothing to do with birth, like physiology. And so that's one. But I think the bigger issue with birth is that we have this. Okay, so I believe that there's a birth field. So like a toroidal field that is generated from within the mother in the womb. And this is basically opening a dimension between this reality and the next, right? It's so the soul can come in, and it's this field that the mother creates that is unconscious, biological, and it connects her to the egregore of birth, the Great Mother. And in that process, the birthing field, when it's really allowed to generate, it creates this safe space, and the masculine role is to hold that to make sure it's protected, and the feminine role is to generate it and just release and relax and go deeper. And so what has happened is through intervention, and kind of like a colonialization of birth, what's happened is that that birth field has started to have fear in it, pain and fear. And so what happens is the mother is afraid of birth itself because of all these ancestral wounds, with the but you know how trauma passes through different generations. So we have a fear of birth itself, and then that trauma given to us by mothers, our grandmothers, and so far back, we are afraid of giving birth. And fear in a birth process is like holding the brakes. So if you try to get your car to move and you got one foot on the brake the whole time, you can't go anywhere. And so what happens is the generation of this birth field is reduced, and the strength of connection to oneself and this field is reduced, and we do need more help, and we end up having to have interventions because we're afraid. So that's the big one, is fear. It's been like inoculated into our consciousness. And what happens in that process is, if I, as a baby, or I should say when I was a baby, right, because we all were, when we come into the world, and we experience fear, we automatically close down, and we tend to give our authority over to others, right? So we get this initial imprinting, a limbic imprinting from birth, that the world is a scary place, that it's not safe, we are not supported, and we are disconnected. So going into another big, big issue that we're dealing with in modernization of birth is cutting the umbilical cord before it's done pulsing. This is huge because a lot of the baby's blood is in the placenta. And so that's one thing. But then another thing is that the biggest physiological change of our entire life is going from a cycle with our mother to being an independent, autonomous cycle with ourself. And I mean this like literally, with like nutrients and blood and oxygen, right? And now all of a sudden we come out, and in a natural childbirth, we are allowed to learn how to breathe because we're connected to mom. The cord is still giving us oxygen. It's still giving us nutrients and blood. And we're like able to take a breath with spaciousness. But when the cord is cut, we have to breathe or die, and so it's this moment of panic, and you lose all that blood. So you're like symbolically being disconnected to source, from source. You're being disconnected from your source, which is your mother, and you have to breathe now or die. So this creates an incredible imprint of fear and insecurity. So then what happens is, in order to survive, oftentimes there's a intervention, and the doctor or somebody has to help you get to breathe, and then we feel dependent on authority. So this is like the saying, who controls birth controls the earth, is essential, because what we experience during that time literally creates the lens from which we see ourselves in the world.
I know you said that the main reason they started making the woman lie down to give childbirth is so that the doctor could see things better, but with everything that at one time was beneficial for humanity, there seems to be an intentionality behind the degradation of some of the ways that we operate as humans. Would you agree that this is another one of those instances where there is some intentionality at some level behind this?
Yeah, I mean, when I look back at the history, there's a really good book about birth. It's just birth, and it's like the history of it. When we had birth at home, surrounded by elders, and specifically elder women and our sisters and things, I think that was a really normal process. And yes, we did die. Like, it happened. And so there are times when Western medicine is important. I experienced that firsthand with my emergency C-section. I appreciate that. I appreciate the ability for us to be able to be saved when we're in these situations. However, I do agree, and I think that, if we are to colonize or disconnect humans from nature, the first step is to disconnect ourselves from, first from ourselves, right? So you have this feeling of fear. You can't trust yourself. You can't trust your parents. You can't trust the world. Now it's going to be much easier to manipulate people, because fear is the number one tool for manipulation. So I really do think that it has a huge, I think it was intentional. And I think that it was done in order to have more power and control over the masses. And I think that's a big part of the colonial tool belt. We've got like alcohol, religion, birth, taking the kids and raising them into a different you know, like the Indian schools. So I think, yeah, I personally do. I tend to be a little bit more of a conspiracy theorist, but
Well, you're in the right
realist.
place.
But yeah, I know, which is why I feel like I can just get into that with you. But I do think so because it's interesting how within every birth, there's this opportunity for evolution or not,
Mm.
right? So when a man's sperm is maturing, um, based on the experiences that he's having in his world, certain genes will be pulled to that maturation. So, for example, if I'm in like a warring society where I have to
Mm.
fight or I feel stressed a lot, then my body will say, oh, I need to make sure that my children have strong bodies and the ability to be resilient and withstand hardships,
Right.
right? And so I'll pull those genes to the body will pull those genes into the sperm every time it matures. If the man is feeling like he's in a loving, creative, nurturing environment, then it'll pull genes that are more about development, like intellectual development and creativity, and less about physical strength, right? And so that's every single cycle that a man has with his maturation of sperm. The same is true with a woman. Every cycle that she has, right before ovulation, there's a maturation of the egg that happens, and the same exact thing happens. This is called genomic imprinting. So every single time, every single month, the body is saying, I'm evolving. Am I evolving our species or am I continuing this fight or flight kind of thing? And there's no wrong answer because we have to survive and thrive. And so the same as in the pregnancy, when a mother is feeling loved and nurtured, as that baby grows, it will activate these genes either for like fighting and strength or creativity
Mm.
and intellectual, like in intelligence. And so this in empathy. And so this happens every single time. And of course, it isn't like, oh, I had a bad thought. Now my baby's going to be, no, it's like the chronic feeling underneath. It's like the undertow in which the baby is born because the baby's literally swimming in and being created by the juices of the mother and what she experiences. She is the lens from which the baby experiences the outside world. And how mom feels about the baby and how dad feels about the baby will directly affect how the baby becomes, like who the baby becomes, subconsciously, physically, emotionally, spiritually.
Mm.
And so what I've been really passionate about bringing up is like seeing birth as a rite of passage. Like if I am coming into this experience, first of all, I think that our daughters and our sons need to be taught like fertility in like this rite of passage kind of way. Like every young girl should learn how her cycle works. Oh, I can tell when I'm fertile based on my cervix, based on the fluid I'm experiencing, based on my temperature. I'm going to know exactly when I'm ovulating. Now imagine how few abortions we would have if girls were taught that at a young age, and when it was time to actually have babies, they would be ready and they would be able to have conscious conception. They could actually decide. And then if men were taught that same process and they understood like the flavor changes or the how to retain their own semen and recycle it, and then they could also be active participants in when conception occurs instead of whoops a baby. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with oops a babies. I have plenty of them. I wasn't consciously conceiving and doing all that stuff with mine, and they're awesome people. But like it would be incredible as a society if our children were taught that when they were growing up. So that's something I'm really passionate about. And then also the birth itself, like a father feeling empowered to be like, okay, I get that I'm going to be pushed away by my wife. Like or partner, she's going to push me away. I'm going to have to love unconditionally. I'm going to have to keep coming back, even though I'm not feeling safe in this situation. I'm going to have to strengthen myself because guess what? Your kids are going to do the same thing. So if you're able to like start feeling like unconditionally loving and supportive, regardless of what's coming at you from this very hormonal woman,
Mm.
then you can that's your rite of passage in understanding how to be a better father and
Right.
partner. And the woman, same thing is as she's doing the work to open up and release and thaw the frozen emotional landscape that's been holding her in fear around birth, then she can open up and become this like vessel in which this baby can come through with grace.
Mhm.
And of course, there are complications, but when those occur, if mom and dad can be like, this is a rite of passage, fortifying us into parenthood, fortifying us and like I can look back and say, hey, I did that. If I can do that, whatever's coming at me, this kid's going to throw at me, I can
Right.
handle it. I just climbed a mountain.
Yeah, 100%. I want to go deeper into the spiritual, metaphysical aspects of childbirth. You mentioned a few times the birth field. Maybe we could get a little deeper into that, as well as the Great Mother. You said she is a birthing archetype in a sense. Talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah. Okay, so field theory is something that I've like to dive into, right? And like for example, when a baby is born, there's this morphogenetic, or not born, conceived. There's a morphogenetic field that starts to occur at conception, and it's just like this energy around the baby that starts to tell it, orchestrate how it forms. This is the head, this is the heart, this is these are the lungs. There's like two different fields. There's the morphogenetic field and then there's the biofield. The morphogenetic field is first. It happens before there's much else, and it uses, like, you can imagine like the DNA is like the harp, and the morphogenetic field is like playing the harp, and each of those strings is like the genes of the DNA, and it's like, so this field is starting to like pulse. They've actually found through like monitoring stuff, like these electromagnetic frequencies coming off of the baby that pulse, and it activates the DNA. And so this is kind of how that starts to occur. And then once there's enough biology there, the biofield takes over. And that's just like, the biofield is like the functioning of how our body works. And it's the electromagnetic kind of rhythm that goes on within the body. And the morphogenetic field and the biofield kind of have this interplay. And so that's going on within each of us all the time. And then, people see it's like, oh, that's like the aura, or that's, the biofield is like the part of us that's like this toroidal field that we're always emitting from our hearts. Like, I don't know if you've seen that, but there's like, you can measure that, right? There's this field coming off of us at all times. When birth happens, the field shifts from our hearts to our uterus. And the uterus starts to play a huge role in that. It like starts to become the center of this generation of this stronger field, and that stronger field reaches out. So my experience, I saw this continuum of all the mothers that have ever given birth, of all species that give birth, all that were in this moment with me right now, and all that would be doing it in the future. We were like one continuum concept. It was this unification of sort. And I felt and heard through psychic connection the Great Mother, which I consider the egregore of birth itself. So she's not dependent on my belief. She's dependent on the process of it happening, which is kind of this primordial being. And oh, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say that you mentioned earlier that the Great Mother egregore has, in a sense, been altered by fear. And that makes me think of all the other archetypes, the unseen intelligences and forces that have influenced humanity since the beginning of time, how much those have been altered or even infiltrated by darker forces or intelligences that want to gain power, even humans that want to gain power.
Yeah. Well, I don't think the Great Mother herself has been altered. What I think is that there's been this fracturing of it. So like, just like whenever this field is being generated, the highest goal, or is to become in complete grace and unity with this Great Mother. And then what happens is you're in this like field of protection, right? And so from that space, like that's the most ideal. If I can't get to that point, there's another energy that's created. Do you know what I mean? Like and then the more I get to like the suffering, the more there's like these different fractured beings that come from that. So there very well could be like I don't want to call it a demon, but some kind of a parasitic, louche feeding being that's like specifically in those places where it's extremely disempowering. I mean, if you look at the history of birth, there was an era, and I don't remember the exact dates, but I know most of the 19th century and into the 20th century, women were given twilight sleep, which was basically like belladonna mixed with other components. And so what would happen is the woman would go in, and usually it was really wealthy women. And so they would go in and they'd take their little concoction, and then they would come in and ask her questions. And as soon as they realized she couldn't remember anything, then they would bring her into the birthing room, and they would actually like strap her down where she had lamb's wool leather straps on, and they've used the lamb's wool so that you couldn't see, like it wasn't causing like redness on the wrists, but they would strap her on her arm, her hands, wrists, and ankles, and then she would be writhing in pain. And they learned that she could wake herself from this delusion through her own screams. So they started to put cotton balls with oil in the mother's ears. And like the only people that really knew the horrors that were going on at that time were the doctors and nurses and the people that lived near. So the people that were living near the hospitals were reporting these horrific screams. And this is why the doctors started cutting women open to try to pull the baby out. This is why they started inventing forceps to try to pull the baby out, because the baby wasn't coming out naturally because she was literally strapped down. And again, what happened afterwards is mom wakes up and the baby's in her hands and she has no memory of all that. Dad's not allowed anywhere near. And so this like horrific experience is sought after because people are like, oh, there was no pain. It was great. Meanwhile, deep in the subconscious mind, we're totally disempowering our next generation and ourselves. And so we're giving our power away because of fear of pain, right? And so, and it's so modern. But like, imagine the kind of being that could be born from that pain, like how they could, in a spiritual sense, like, and I don't get into this with most people because sometimes they can't comprehend it, but like, if there's these egregores born from experience, shared experience that continues on and on and on, then this parasitic being that's feeding on birth could totally exist in those realms and would have been born through that, And so, yeah, and that's just one example. There's many, many more of different kinds. Ether, they experimented with so many different drugs before they finally came on the epidural, which is the main way that they go now. And so the epidural just numbs the woman from like the chest down. I mean, the abdomen down.
How much do you think technology, our modern technology that we utilize in childbirth every day, is affecting this field?
I think that it is affecting it a lot. And I worry. So one of the reasons I'm feeling drawn to really speak out about a lot of this is because I feel like we're at the precipice where we as a species could lose birth. I feel like we could become so industrialized, especially going into this transhuman world, that we would just give all of our power to technology and technology could take it away from us. And I mean, not like intentionally, because it's just like the twilight sleep. Women wanted it. They wanted it because they didn't understand the complexity and the power that they had. They gave it away. And it's the same with right now coming into this realm of like new technology. We could easily just be like, oh, I'm just going to schedule my C-section, or sure, I'll donate my womb to like the thing that's going to start birthing babies and gestating them. Who knows? I don't know where we're headed. I know that technology is growing leaps and bounds, and I'm very, I feel like the more we can embody ourselves and embody our literal procreation, we can go from being like fear-based, easy to control masses to like in our bodies, fully empowered, confident co-creators. And that's a big one. So birth practices now, I mean, there's countries with 90% cesarean rates, scheduled cesarean rates. And in the US, we're pretty far behind that, thankfully, but it's becoming a strong concern. And there's nothing wrong with cesareans if they're needed, But I do think that scheduling them for fear and convenience is dangerous territory because there's a lot of things that happen. Like, for example, a baby is born sterile. So the gut biome is sterile, right? When the baby passes through the mother's vagina and comes out into the world, they get inoculated. And that's another reason why babies are always putting things in their mouth. They're inoculating their gut microbiome so that they have the ability to break stuff down because we are a community of billions, trillions of beings, microbiome and cells all working together. And so when we're able to acknowledge that this all comes from, we're actually inheriting our microbiome from our parents and the same from the planet. Like there's a genetic inheritance that we need to start talking about. It's a right. I have the right to inherit my family's genetic biome. I have the right to inherit a world that hasn't been mauled by genetic mutations, but yet that's just happening. And so it's something that we need to start talking about that because the DNA has a resonance. And there's there's the idea that we've been manipulated for, many, many generations now from all the way back to Egypt or beyond, right? Atlas and Atlantis, whatever. There's all these times that we might have been manipulated and maybe our spirit gene was turned off or There's all these theories, right? But still there's a resonance in our DNA. And I was having this awesome conversation with a Hindu man the other day. And we were talking about, he believes in Hinduism that every human has gone through the incarnation of every single organism on the planet, because each of these has a sensory perspective that we need in order to be fully human. Because we're like we become like kind of the most sensory capable of all beings. And so in that, just, from that's the Hindu perspective. And now take that to the next level and look at our genes and our DNA. And we have this DNA of all these other beings in our body. We literally have the ability to resonate with and empathetically connect with all beings in our ecosystem, all of our relations, right? So this is something that, we need to be able to preserve. And when we can do this in a way that causes like love and connection, then I think that will really activate our humanity.
It makes me wonder how much vaccines and the many different types of inoculations that are forced upon a child is hindering that connection and the natural ability to develop.
Yeah, it does. And so there's a lot of, they say that like all of our, like I said, the lens of our perception of ourself and reality is completely constructed by our in utero experience, what we're experiencing in the womb, our birth, and our formative years. And then what happens is all that stuff goes unconscious. So we're not noticing it. But the Florence Scovel, a metaphysician from the 30s, has a book called The Game of Life and How to Play It. And she talks a lot about how to deprogram the subconscious mind. But like what she's talking about is the subconscious mind is like a servant to us. It's like always trying to serve us in what our beliefs are, our formative beliefs. If we believe the world is scary, unsafe, disconnected, and that we don't have power, we're going to constantly be replaying this throughout our entire life, because our subconscious mind is so committed to serving us and what we've told it is the truth, our truth, right? Our subjective truth. And so this is something that unless you do the work to like get in there and kind of help reestablish this, break those old records and reestablish what you actually believe and want to believe. And it takes a lot to get to that subconscious mind, and then the superconscious mind she talks about is the mind that's like connected to source. So that's like you could just jump past a lot of that inner drama by connecting to source, and that helps move it through. But like what we say, what we believe, how we like the patterns that we create in our reality, these give us clues into what we believe. So like before I start with anyone when I'm talking about birth, it's like, what do you believe about birth? Because that will tell you what your kind of unconditional programming is. And most of us have come into the world in a scary way. Most of us were born in hospitals. Most of us were born in bright lights and beeping and mom being scared or in pain or dad not knowing what to do. So of course we're going to feel these ways. Of course we're going to feel uncertain to connect with each other. Of course, we're going to feel the world is a scary, malicious place. Like, of course. I mean, this is our foundational belief system, So whereas imagine you have a father who understands that his role is to be the protector of the birth field. His role is to make sure that birth field is safe from any outside dangers. Like if, for example, if I'm birthing in the middle of the wilderness, and I'm just in it, I'm totally like open and I'm vulnerable and my body is just getting open, and all of a sudden a bear comes, what's going to happen? I'm going to see the bear and I'm going to be afraid. That fear is going to tell my body it's not safe to birth here. My body will stop unless I'm too far along. But if I like haven't opened all the way, my body will stop. I will get somewhere safe away from the bear, and then I can birth again. So this is the natural cycle of the body. If I'm afraid of birth, I can't do that, right? But if I can release my fear and trust the process, I can get open. But if I'm in that space getting open and my husband is here or my tribe and they're like chase the bear away, so I never even see the bear, or I know I'm safe, then, I can continue to birth. And so that's his job, or the masculine role, or the birth, team's role is to keep outside fear from coming to the woman. Now, the other part of that is sometimes we have our own inner fear. So he can say, if he knows me really well, he can ask me questions like, what are you feeling right now? Or what are you feeling any fear? How can I help? How can I support? He can just kiss her, because sensuality activates all these beautiful hormones that you can actually have an orgasmic birth. And that happens with touching and connection and kissing and massaging and holding, and all the things that got the baby in can get the baby out. And you can have these erotic birth experiences, but not in a hospital. That's weird. Right. But another problem with hospitals is that, and I don't mean this across the board, but often what happens is that they're trained to look for the worst case scenario and tell the patients about it. So you tell a mother, this happened to my cousin. Oh my gosh, that baby is too big. It's not going to come out. We're going to have to induce right now, or you will not be able to have that baby. 17-year-old cousin of mine. Oh, okay. Yeah, for sure. I want the baby out. Too big. That's terrifying. And now the birth starts in fear, disempowerment. We have to help you. We have to fix you. That was, I was irate. I had to leave because I couldn't stop it. At this point, it was just the industry taking over, and I had to step back. Actually was causing more problems because I was like, that's not true. It's not true. Your baby's not too big. Don't listen to them.
Since you started doing this, have you noticed more people becoming aware of the problems with our modern birthing systems and maybe looking more into the alternatives?
Unfortunately, no. I mean, there was in the 80s and 90s, in the 80s especially, there was definitely it was coming up. And then with the Ina May and a lot of the midwifery, the reactivation of midwifery, there was a big movement. It seemed like it was going to get better and better. People were starting to learn about fertility awareness methods. They were starting to learn about how you could actually play such a big, that book that I was talking about with the limbic imprinting information comes from a book called The Secret Life of Your Unborn Baby by this man, Thomas Burney. That was in the 80s that it came out. We've known this stuff, but unfortunately, the fear has been revving up so hard, and people have been coming down. So for example, traditional midwifery, you learn from a midwife that's been doing it forever. You apprentice, you do it for a certain amount of time until you're comfortable, you take on your own role. Well, now what's going on is that there's licensing. So midwives become licensed. Oh, now insurance will pay for it if they're licensed. But if they're licensed, they can't deliver twins. They can't deliver breech births. They can't go past a certain, I think it's 42 weeks. So there's all these things that they're not allowed to do to keep their license. So they're just being more regulated. Women are losing power. You have to birth out without the midwife now, because if you want to have twins at home, or you want to have a breech birth, or you want to go past the time that they think, that the industry, and there's, I think that there's a lot of it's like safety rails, they're trying to create safety rails for people, but the problem again is that the lens of birth isn't that it's sacred. The lens of birth isn't that it's a powerful initiation. It's that it's a traumatic experience that has to be monitored by the hospital. You have to go. It's a condition, and I think that's gotten more prevalent. And I think with epidurals and Pitocin, which is they came up with that, I don't remember exactly when, but it's because it's mainstream now. And so you go in, and if you're not progressing the way you're supposed to, then you give you Pitocin. Well, Pitocin comes from large animals. I think it's a horse. And so the uterine of a horse needs more. It has a different it's stronger. So you end up having stronger contractions that are harder to withstand as a woman. And you've got an IV, and you got to sit down with your IV. You got to be stationary. You can't move your body. You have to sit there, and you're in bright lights, people coming in and out that you don't know. That is the worst environment. You cannot create the field. You can't. You can, but it's harder. You have to really not let them get in and get super into yourself. And hopefully you have a really good birth team that can hold that shit at bay if you're going to birth in the hospital, because you're going to hear all the scary things that they're going to want to tell you. Oh, she's not progressing. Her heart rate's not like this. This. And then all of a sudden your fear, it starts to come in, and the brakes, and then Pitocin pushes it open, and then it's so painful, epidural. Oh, I can't feel anything, and I'm just going to wait for the baby to come up. Man. And this is the process. Oh, and then that's not working, C-section. Hospital can say, we did everything we could if the baby dies, but we still have a large morbidity rate for mothers and babies. We shouldn't have what we have in this country, considering the amount of medical potentials for saving lives, yet we do. And so but again, it's all the lens. But I feel with the modernization and the technology that's come up in the last, several decades, it's actually taking us backwards, not forwards in birth. And with all the logistics around licensed midwives, there's all these things they can't do. So then again, it's taking it backwards, making it more medicalized and less free. There is a movement called free birth, and that's been good. But one of the problems with free birth is that you have all these women birthing on their own. And I appreciate that a lot, but there's so much wisdom in the midwifery field. There's so much wisdom in this, like in birth professionals that know how to be with a woman. Like, okay, you've got a swelling cervix. Let's pop you up, put your butt in the air, take the baby off, let the swelling come down. Now you can open up and give birth. No, you don't need a C-section because of that, right? So there's so much knowledge that is going to be gone if we don't protect it. And so as much as I love and appreciate the free birth movement, I do really strongly feel like we need to protect the traditional midwifery knowledge.
And tell us a little bit more, what is the free birth movement?
It's about decolonizing birth. So it's like are industrialized, and the birth process is industrialized. And so it's taking it back and just giving birth on your own. And there are, people that like support that, like you can have mentors and things. And I don't know as much about that because I've gone really into the midwifery stuff because I love the wisdom that comes from them. I've been at plenty of births where, like, had I not witnessed a midwife or doctor coming in with some like tried and true techniques, that could have gone a lot worse. So I feel like they're important to hold that space. And I've had babies that have come out that needed a little extra something, and the midwives and doctors know how to do that. Like in Costa Rica, there's a doctor that comes to you at your house. I mean, and that's what we used to do here. Yeah. Like doctors used to be taught that when you come into the room of a birthing mother, you have to make sure that she feels really safe with your entrance. You can't just come in. You have to like kind of prep her. Oh, doctor's here. Someone's coming in. It's, this person, it's like the field is delicate and it can easily be like, I mean, think about how easy it is to go from love into fear, with one word.
That makes a lot of sense. You touched on the initiate roles in birth, feminine, masculine, and baby, mostly the masculine, but let's get a little deeper into that. Tell us a little more.
Yeah. So the woman's initiation is to surrender. Her initiate role is to surrender to her body and trust. So that's huge. How we are born is how we will birth, because we've only experienced that, right? Unless we've done all the work, right? But like if I have never thought of birth ever, and all of a sudden I'm pregnant, then I'm generally going to give birth the way I was born, unless I sit there and I do the work. And I can. And so that's the nice thing about pregnancy, is that you have this very malleable time. Bodies are shifting. You don't look the same when you're 9 months pregnant than you did when you were maiden. And so there's this process of becoming a mother that physiologically happens to your body. And so it's a time where we're really flexible and we're really able to shift and thaw the like emotional landscape that we have, finding those places of resistance and fear and moving through them. So there's a really great practice. It was the Birthing from Within folks, Pam England, came up with this practice. And what it is you imagine the worst case scenario, the thing you're most afraid of, and not death, but like everything else up to the point of death. You imagine that happening in full vivid color, right? And then you imagine it again a second time, but the second time you don't change anything. You just imagine yourself coping with strength in each of these situations. So let's say I'm terrified of like a C-section, and I imagine like I'm at home, I can't open, so it's been days, I need to get to the hospital, I have to like have Pitocin, or I have to go have a C-section, that could be my fear. Then I imagine it a second time, but I see the same thing happening. I'm at home, I can't open, I have to go to the hospital, but every time I'm like strong in the decision. I'm coping with that with strength. I see myself moving through the entire process with strength and coping with it with resilience. It's not as scary now. I know I can get through it. So we have to, as a mother, you have to face your fears. You have to recognize your fears. You have to acknowledge them. You have to embrace them. You have to understand the shit's going to hurt. I mean, there's a lot of people that don't want to use pain, or I say pain is passage. Pain is like a part of that passage. It's like the thing that makes you strong. It's the fire that burns you to become the phoenix, right? You have to go through this pain, but it's not hurting you. It's just like when you work out or you climb a mountain and you've got like, you feel, or you're doing super intense yoga. When you're doing it, it hurts, but it's hurting good, right? It's strengthening you. It's making you better. So when we come into, first of all, pain in our society, painkillers, Don't take Tylenol, Advil. Just don't feel the pain. Nah, man, we need to feel that pain. We need to actually feel the pain. We need to relax our bodies, let our endorphins kick in, the dopamine. We have everything we need. Matter of fact, the hormones or the endorphins that are present when you do heroin, when you do ecstasy, when you smoke pot, all those things are right here. Even mushrooms and DMT, they're all released during birth. So the more you can relax your body, you actually have inside of you this biochemical laboratory that will release these things and deal with the pain. So like when I was giving birth, I'm breathing, I'm relaxing. The more I relax, I feel the pain comes up. And so like it's like coming up, and then all of a sudden, instead of like trying to get away and like pulling myself up higher in my awareness, I relax. I dive in like a pool. I go right into the pain. I breathe into that pain. And what happens is the dopamine kicks in. The endorphins rush. I start to feel better. And the more I do this, every contraction, I don't resist, I relax. I don't resist, I relax. I relax. I feel the resistance, I intentionally relax. This is the initiation of the mother, to fully trust her body, to fully relax, and to also, during the pregnancy, get this shit clear. A lot of us don't ever talk about what we want with our babies, how we want to raise them, how we want to discipline them, what our goals are. When we have like that stuff, when we're getting into relationships, we need to start with that. Like, do you want kids? Yes. Okay. Well, how do you want to raise them? These questions are important because what happens during a birth is this shit comes up in the mom's mind. All these fears. Like there was a story where a mother, they didn't say till death do us part at their wedding. So she was fixating on this and she wasn't progressing in labor. Midwife asks, is something on your heart? Oh, we didn't say it till death do us part. He's going to leave me. Well, they brought in a pastor. They did it right there on the spot, and the birth happened like that. Yeah. So the mother has to become a clear mind, trust, and complete surrender. And when she can do that, the birth is just, it happens so smoothly. So that's her initiate role, surrender and trust. The father, guardian of the birth field, to be that strong rock that can withstand the storm of her emotion and be able to still hold loving space regardless, and not take it personally, understand this is hormonal shit, and I say that because women, I'm gonna own it. We get hormonal when we're pregnant, we do. I got mad. I met one woman, she was telling me, oh, my husband's breathing. It just drove me crazy. And I was like, yeah, we just gonna keep breathing, So, but yeah, like stuff like that, so we get all these emotions. Some women get mad at the man for like she has to go through pregnancy. He doesn't have to. Like this stuff comes up. So a man's got to be solid. He's got to be able to hold his ground like a warrior, not a violent warrior, but a loving warrior, a warrior of peace who can just be like, I feel you. I understand. I feel you. I'm empathizing. I'm connecting. I'm not taking it personally. I'm right here for you. I will not leave. I'll be there in the room with you. I'll massage you. I'll hold you. I'll kiss you. I'll do whatever you need to like help you release your fear. And that is the most powerful thing, because one of the other things that has to be released during those initiations is that the mother is never going to be a maiden again. She's never going to be able to live for herself, by herself, without any responsibilities. Even when she's old, she's always going to be a mom. The maiden is done. And that is a hard thing for a lot of women to release. There's like a part of us that that's like, we want to be able to live for ourselves and make our own decisions and not think about others. That happens. This beautiful flower of a maiden is going to become a fruit that's round and not pretty. It is pretty, but not like a flower, right? And then, so that happens. And the more we can release into that as women, the better. And the same thing with the man. He was a bachelor. He had freedom. He could do whatever he wanted. Now, all of a sudden, he's the rock. He can't go anywhere. He's got to stay right here. He's got to make sure these kids are safe. He's got to make sure she's safe. And I mean, of course, that's not the only thing, but like, that's a masculine role. He's got to be present in his heart and mind in that family to be able to hold that kind of sacred space. Mm-hmm. So his rite of passage is to become the space holder, right? And that is when you're in a birth with a man. I mean, it's my favorite. I love women too, but like I love seeing the moment when the father sees his child for the first time and cries. Even the most tough guys, they hold their baby and cry. It's like this bond that just happens, and he starts to recognize like, wow, I'm literally responsible for the life of this being. I can't just do what I want to do. I got to make sure this little one's safe, And so it's like changes you from like a bachelor to a protector to a warrior. And then the rite of passage for the baby is the imprint. Baby is completely wide open, totally a blank page, with the exception of the limbic imprinting within the womb and the sperm and egg. But still, baby's receptive. It's like a sponge coming out. I'm experiencing the world, and it's just this wide open heart. And so how the birth and how the pregnancy, birth, and formative years happen, that's the rite of passage of each baby, is to be the receiver, to fill that color, to color the page. What are we going to be? Who are we going to be? And so it's just full innocence. The baby's rite of passage is the rite of innocence. And how we as parents learn how to hold that. And of course, we're going to have problems. We're going to have times where it's hard. We're going to there's sleepless nights, challenges like crazy. And so that's why the birth is so powerful. If you have an empowering birth experience, you're not going to have as much postpartum depression. You're not going to have relationships spurring apart. If you feel super loved and supported by your man when he's there in the birthing room with you, you're going to reflect on that, and it's going to fortify the relationship when you're not getting sleep, and one of you is sleeping and the other is up with the baby, and all throughout the whole life of the child. It's such an important part of our procreation.
Yeah. Last few minutes we have, let's talk a little bit more about the permaculture of birth and regenerative birth.
Yeah. So what we were talking about around, regenerative birth being, how do we give birth? Thinking about it in a place where each generation is getting better and better. So we actually have, we have these perceptions where I want my daughters to have a better birthing experience. I want my sons to know how to hold space for their partners. That is so important to me because it's regenerative. Right now, the soil of birth is depleted. The microbiome of our planet is depleted. Like this, they go hand in hand. How we perceive ourselves is the foundation from which we treat our world. And so if we are depleted and our children are depleted, and every time we give birth, it's less and less empowering, then we're going to end up having these degenerative birthing experiences versus regenerative. So that's really, really important to me. And, it's a natural ecological process. I mean, all animals give birth. We give birth. We have the ability to do it. Like, it's not something that needs a medical intervention. We actually are totally equipped, and so like the first part within permaculture birth is, the ethics of permaculture are earth care, people care, fair share. So earth care is like in our birthing, there's also a ton of waste, like actual pollution in the birthing industry. There's like these gloves, there's, the needles, there's all the like pads that you birth on and throw away. There's like a ton of trash that's accumulated from that. And I think that it's really important that we start to consider like the effect, including diapers. I mean, I cloth diapered all my kids. And to be honest, they were out of diapers before too. Every single, except one, because he has special needs. But the other ones, all four, out of diapers before too. No problem. They felt wet when they were wet. They didn't have a heaping mountain of trash that they created, within 2 years of their life. So that was another thing, like karmically, I feel drawn to. I'm like, well, I don't want my children to be pollution producers just because they exist. And it's the same with birth. Like, I don't want to give birth in a way that I'm creating all this, trash. So that's something that I think we need to talk about as well within the birthing realm. And then, observing, observe and interact. Oh yeah. So earth care. So that's one. People care. We've touched a lot about that. How do we nurture birth? How do we nurture each other? How do we actually like empower each other? Because every single person is doing their best, and I'm not trying to vilify an industry. I'm saying it's not the individuals in the industry, it's the machine itself. And I think, for where we are, I mean, there's this parasitic, whatever you want to call it, puppet masters that exist in our world, and that they might very well feed off of the loosh of birth. And it's a humongous amount of it because of that birth field. So that's something that I think is really important, to nurture the people care and take it back. And then the fair share, like I was saying in the beginning of this permaculture question, like making sure that every generation has it better than me, better than I had it, better than you had it, better than we have it. Like if we can keep going better and better into like more empowering home birthing, and it doesn't have to be at home. I mean, there can be birth centers and things, or even hospitals can be the right setting if the lights are low, if people know not to just bust in, like, oh, here, come on, all of you observing new medical,
Yeah.
students, come watch this woman give birth,
Yeah.
yeah, it's like the worst, right? So like there's just ways that we could reestablish to create a safe space for women to birth. That's really important. And those are just little changes. Like in a hospital, if people set out to say, okay, I mean, you can do a birth plan. Everyone can create a birth plan, and they have to, in the United States, they have to honor that. So if I write down my idea of what I want for my birth, I want a natural birth. I want to make sure that people are, not just barging in. I don't want to be attached to an IV. I want to have a yoga ball because that really helps. The yoga ball, you sit there and you can just, rotate your hips or bounce or do whatever you need, and it's not like you can get mobile without getting tired.
Wow.
You can just kind of, I want a bathtub. I want all these things. You write that in your birth plan. If there's a complication, talk to my husband. Don't talk to me, right? You put that in. If we create we call this the least change for the greatest effect. So because in the United States we have so much rights around our birthing in the hospital, we can each do that and establish how that works, and don't let the fear in. It's that small. So that's another part of the permaculture principles. Integrate rather than segregate. Like the more of us that are working together to consider birth as a rite of passage and see it, it's just a change of your lens. It's just picking up different glasses and putting them on. Oh, wow, birth is extremely sacred. Huh, that's cool. It's like not just a terrifying medical event, or the sin in which I have to suffer because someone in the past did something wrong. That's been one within certain Christian faith. There's like some people that perceive it as like the retribution of Eve's, eating of the apple. And that all stems from Plato's dualism, which is kind of interesting because early Christians and early Jewish traditions don't see the body as sinful. They don't see sexual union as sinful. They see it actually as a prayer. And so it was this, Plato kind of introduced the idea that like the soul and the flesh are separate, and that you have to go towards the soul and repress the flesh, that the early Roman Catholic Church embodied and put this shame into us. And it's not actually for us to have. Like, we don't need to live in shame of our bodies. Our bodies are beautiful. They're actually given to us by God. It's like, of course, we're going to be able to feel all the things that we have. If I couldn't feel all the beautiful sensations of sexuality and then be able to bring that into my birth and have like an orgasmic childbirth, I wouldn't have like all of I have like this, like I said, the biochemical laboratory inside myself, and all I have to do is let myself feel it. It's powerful, and I think that needs to be shifted too, is to perceive it as sacred, perceive it as a rite of passage, see it as something that's normal and natural.
This is such great information, and you're also working on a book about this very topic. Tell us a little bit about what the audience can expect from that.
Yeah, so I go into I really try to like construct the lens, in a sense, decolonize the birthing process, see it as natural, really invite the masculine back in, because I think that part of the patriarchal issues that we're experiencing, in the last however many years, like generations, I think patriarchy is a result of this disconnection from the birth field. I think that men didn't know what to do or how to do it, and they didn't feel included, and that kind of birthed some of this. And there's also, I also get into that. I get into like how our bodies are, we're colonized, through like this agricultural perspective of like ownership, land ownership. And then therefore I want to make sure my children, my genetic progeny are inheriting my land. Therefore this woman has to be stuck to me forever. That's kind of these ideas, but I break it down with more historical context and more well thought out written ways. And so that's it, kind of go from that realm of like, how did this all start to like, how do we move forward from here? The book's got a lot about the rite of passages, fertility, rites of passages, conception. How do we do conscious conception? I talk about the masculine, feminine, and baby roles within that a little bit more. I also have birth stories interwoven in from people that have donated their stories. My own 5 are in there. And then I have a bunch of actual rites of passage ceremonies in the back. Like, here's all the things you can do. Here's some examples of how you can turn this into a rite of passage so that you can do this ceremony to be able to embody that. And then there's a references in the back for further reading and things so people can kind of get deeper because it's a rabbit hole. And the further you go in, the more you realize that, the birth really, in my opinion, is the number one thing we can take back and change the trajectory of humanity. Like so much. If we can just birth in peace and love and empowerment, then we as a species really change the trajectory that we're going.
On. Well, to close out, give us your final thoughts and remind the audience how they can find out more about you.
Yeah, so you can, I've on Facebook, Alana Bliss. Also, you can email me at Mama Lana Bliss at Gmail. So that's MAMALANA, Mama Lana Bliss, BLISS at gmail.com. And I think that, I want to say that to all those that have given birth and didn't feel like it was an empowering experience, like there's so much healing still in that. And every one of us does our best. And we all really, come into it with what we have been given and what we cultivate. And so there's a lot of pain that I've experienced when I talk to people about birth and fear. And I think that being able to look at it and feel it, and it can be scary, but it's so important. And I have no judgments about any of it because I think that, like I said, we do our best. And I want to send so much love to all the mamas and papas and babies and all of us because we were all born. And we all have birth trauma and healing, even the ones that were the most, amazing births. There's still going to be something that came up. And if there isn't, then awesome. But yeah, I feel like I just want to send out a lot of love for all of us and for our inner children and trust that we can do this, that we have the opportunity to be able to re-empower ourselves and decolonize our birth process.
Wonderful. Thank you so much again, Alana. This was fantastic information. We'll definitely have to do this again. And until next time, everyone have a wonderful evening. We will talk again tomorrow. See y'all then. Hello, friends. I am so excited to tell you about Independent Media Token. Independent Media Token is a brand new way to show your support for independent media without having to donate a dime. Independent Media Token is a cryptocurrency on the Solana blockchain designed to generate funds to promote and foster the growth of independent content creators, allowing them to engage in their art without having to worry about being demonetized. Through a network of media partners, of which you yourself can become a part of, Independent Media Token's goal is to ensure the powers that be can never cut off all of our areas of funding and censor the only free voices left in the world. Join the movement today. You can pick up Independent Media Token using Phantom Wallet or the Solana wallet of your choice, where you can easily swap your Solana for IMT. Grab some IMT today and remember to always know your team. To learn more, visit independentmediatoken.com or use the link right in the description.